This Bible story of Judges 19 will leave you shocked and speechless. There's a story in the Old Testament that, if I'm being honest, I find deeply disturbing, perhaps the most unsettling tale in the entire Bible. It might even be considered inappropriate for younger viewers, so I want to give you a heads up. This video may not be suitable for all ages and could potentially trigger some past traumas. The story I'm referring to unfolds in chapters 19 to 21 of the Book of Judges. Many people are familiar with chapter 19 but may not delve into what follows. I believe there are crucial lessons we can glean from this harrowing account, so let's explore it together. Let's start in Judges chapter 19. The narrative opens with a Levite living in the remote hill country of Ephraim. He acquires a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. It's important to note that this Levite is in the northern part of Israel, while she is in the south. Unfortunately, she is unfaithful to him and returns to her father's house in Bethlehem, where she stays for 4 months. Determined to win her back, the Levite travels south to Bethlehem. Upon his arrival, her father warmly welcomes him, insisting he stay longer each time the Levite expresses his desire to leave. After several days of hospitality, the Levite finally insists on returning home. As they make their way back north from Bethlehem, they approach the city of Jebus as night falls. The servant suggests they stop there for the night, but the Levite refuses, worried about staying in a foreign city without fellow Israelites. Instead, they continue on to Gibeah. To their dismay, they find no one willing to offer them shelter, which is surprising given the cultural importance of hospitality in Israelite society. Just when they begin to lose hope, an old man arrives and asks why they're still out in the square. After explaining their situation, he invites them to stay with him. The Levite assures the old man that they have plenty of food for their journey. They just need a place to rest their heads. And so begins a story filled with significant lessons that we can all reflect upon. Let's dive deeper into the events that unfold and uncover the insights waiting for us in this challenging narrative. The concubine spent the night at the old man's house in Gibeah, but then something shocking happened. While they were enjoying their evening, a group of wicked men from the city surrounded the house and pounded on the door. They shouted to the homeowner, "Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have our way with him." This is where the story takes a dark turn. These perverse men from Gibeah, who belonged to the tribe of Benjamin, demanded that the old man surrender his guest for their immoral intentions. The homeowner stepped outside and pleaded with them, "Please do not commit this wicked act. This man has come under my roof. Instead, I'll offer my virgin daughter and the man's concubine. Abuse them instead, but do not disgrace this man." What happens next is unimaginable. The passage tells us that the men refused to listen, and instead the Levite took his concubine and pushed her out to them. They assaulted her throughout the night until morning, and when dawn broke, they finally let her go. I want to emphasize why I mentioned that this story might not be suitable for minors. Just picture the scene. A group of depraved men taking turns violating a woman throughout the night, leaving her traumatized and battered. In the early light, she crawled back to the house, collapsing at the threshold, utterly exhausted from the horrific ordeal. When the Levite rose the next morning and opened the door to continue his journey, he found her lying at the entrance, her hands on the threshold. "Get up. Let's go," he called to her, but there was no response. Tragically, she had succumbed to her injuries. What follows is heartbreaking. He placed her lifeless body on his donkey and returned home. In an act of utter despair and horror, he took a knife, cut her into 12 pieces, and sent each piece throughout the territory of Israel. Everyone who saw this was shocked, declaring that nothing like this had ever occurred since the Israelites left Egypt. Imagine the gravity of this act. The Levite sent pieces of his deceased concubine to the 12 tribes of Israel, along with letters detailing the atrocity committed against her by his own brethren, the tribe of Benjamin. When the other tribes received this grim message, they were astounded, saying that such a thing had never happened in their history. There's so much more to unpack in the following chapters, but I want to pause here to reflect on some vital lessons we can draw from this unsettling tale. The first lesson is this: without accountability in our lives, we often stray far from what is right. As noted in Judges 19:1, in those days when there was no king in Israel, it's a reminder that when we feel unaccountable, when there's no fear of repercussions or responsibility for our choices, we're more likely to make poor decisions, thinking we can act without consequence. When people live in isolation, without accountability to anyone, troubling things can happen. And that was precisely the situation in Israel. There was no king, and while the law existed, it wasn't being respected or enforced. As a result, the people found themselves committing acts they likely never thought they would. The second lesson I want to highlight is the importance of treating every human being as a reflection of God's image. In this story, the Levite was horrified at the thought of the men abusing him, yet he thought it acceptable to offer his daughter and his concubine in their place. This shows a troubling mindset, valuing the life and dignity of another man over the lives and virtues of women. It's a stark reminder that we need to respect everyone as creations of God. If you find yourself struggling with inappropriate content online, I encourage you to see every woman as a bearer of God's image. Imagine how you would feel if someone treated your daughter the way you see them being portrayed on the screen. Now, let's delve into the third point. The further we stray from God, the more vulnerable we become to actions we never thought we'd take. Throughout the book of Judges, we see a nation slowly drifting away from God, and what happens in chapters 19 to 21 is a sobering culmination of that drift. It serves as a warning for us as well. If we don't maintain a close relationship with God, we can easily find ourselves making choices we would have never imagined. 10 years ago, you might have said there's no way you would get a divorce, have an affair, or lose your job for watching something inappropriate online. But the truth is, the further we stray from God, the more susceptible we become to sin. Sadly, the story doesn't end in chapter 19. In chapter 20, it takes a darker turn as a civil war breaks out among the 11 tribes of Israel against the tribe of Benjamin. This conflict arises because it was the Benjamites who committed the horrific act against one of their own. I encourage you to read chapters 20 and 21 for the full details. To summarize, this battle resulted in thousands of lives lost on both sides, leaving only 600 men from Benjamin alive. Then in chapter 21, the other tribes begin to feel compassion for Benjamin, realizing that this tribe might become extinct without any women for those men to marry and continue their lineage. This introduces my fourth lesson. Every poor decision we make comes with consequences we cannot control. While the actions of the Benjamites were heinous, the fallout from those choices affected the entire nation. The decision made by the other 11 tribes to go to war against Benjamin came with serious consequences, and both sides had to face the fallout from their choices. The Benjamites had their share of consequences as well. It's important to remember, you can choose your sins, but you can't choose your consequences. Every decision we make has repercussions, and often we don't get to dictate what those will be. In the aftermath, the Israelites targeted a clan called Jabesh Gilead and ended up killing many of their men. However, they found 400 women from Jabesh Gilead who had never been with a man. They then gave these women to 400 of the 600 surviving Benjamite men to help them rebuild their families. But here's the catch. That still left 200 Benjamite men without wives. This highlights how one bad decision often leads to another. What happens next is quite a twist. The Israelites remember their vow not to give their daughters to the Benjamites, but realize they can work around it. So they come up with a plan. They announce a festival where their daughters will dance, suggesting that the Benjamite men can capture the women. Technically, this way, they wouldn't be violating their vow, since they wouldn't be giving their daughters. The men would just take them. So, during the festivities, the Benjamites seize this opportunity and abduct women while they're dancing to take them back as wives. I know this story sounds wild, and I tried to summarize it quickly, but the core message is clear. One bad decision can lead to a cascade of poor choices, impacting many lives. If you go through this story again, you'll see how many people were adversely affected by these choices. Some Benjamite men faced consequences for their actions, but many innocent people in Benjamin and Jabesh Gilead suffered too. The fallout reached families and communities, showing how interconnected our decisions can be. Now here's the fifth and final lesson I want to share. God offers us grace even amid our most destructive choices. The book of Judges concludes with a striking reminder that despite the chaos, the Benjamites were allowed to rebuild their lives and cities. Each Israelite returned to their own tribe and family. The last verse encapsulates the entire book. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. While God showed mercy by allowing the tribe of Benjamin to survive and thrive, it's essential to recognize that there were still consequences for their actions. If you take away anything from this video, I hope it's this. Every decision we make has consequences, often beyond what we can measure, and we may not get to choose those consequences. See you in the next video. Take care, and God bless.